our second meeting of the, informally we're calling ourselves the Renaming Committee. This is the Redistricting Advisory Committee. So I'm looking at the agenda. I'm calling the meeting to order at 6 p.m. sharp. First order of business is a slight agenda change. I'm going to share my screen so everyone can see what I'm reading because it's a little lengthy. Let's see, there we go. Okay. So the purpose of these preliminary motions are to be compliant, excuse that alarm. Preliminary motions, districting, because we're meeting electronically. We need to pass a few motions and do a roll call to record for the minutes that we're all here. We're going to have to do this every single meeting, a little cumbersome, but this will permit us all to join from home for all meetings moving forward. All right, so to conduct this meeting wholly electronically and to effectuate both the emergency procedures authorized by FOIA and the emergency ordinance, this committee needs to make certain findings and determinations for the record. First, because each member of the committee is participating in this meeting from a separate location. Sorry, can everyone mute their mics? We must verify that a quorum of members is participating and that each member's voice is clear, audible, and at an appropriate volume for all of the other members. Accordingly, I'm going to conduct a roll call and ask each committee member participating in this meeting to state your name and the location from which you are participating. I ask that each of you pay close attention to ensure that you can hear each of your colleagues. Following this roll call, we will vote to establish that every member can be heard, that everyone can hear every other member. At this point, so I'm going to conduct a roll call and let me just pull up the list of current members. All right, I'm just going to read these. I'm looking at the Fairfax County government website, and I'm just going to read the names in the order that they appear on the committee members list.
Hey, Paul, the way it's supposed to work is you're supposed to make the motion. You're supposed to pass the gavel on to the vice chair, and you make the requisite motion. But at that point, until the members are certified, the vice chair takes over the functioning. So you can make the motions.
Okay. All right. So, I mean, Nat, can you clarify, because I just got this document, like, should I conduct a roll call as it says right here, or do I do as Bill says?
Honestly, I'm not overly certain myself. But if you did want to pass the gavel, I believe.
That's right, Bill.
Hey, Paul, I
do
agree
this.
with what
I do
Bill
this all
just
the
said.
time. All of our meetings are remote, so I've done this 1,000 times.
Yeah, that's what we had to do for all the comprehensive plan meetings also.
Okay, thank you both. Thank you, Bill, for clarifying. At this point, I will pass the virtual gavel to Vice Chairman Walker so that I may be heard to make the requisite motion.
And lucky me, I've received it.
Okay.
And now Paul, you make the motion. I move that the advisory committee, blah, blah, blah.
I move that the Redistricting Advisory Committee certify for the record that each member's voice may be adequately heard by each other member of this committee.
Can I get a second?
I second.
Excellent.
All those
Then
in,
it's been moved. Go ahead.
sorry, Sam, no, I don't have the gavel. You have the gavel.
All of those that agree, say aye.
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 All that disagree, speak.
Nay, we don't know yet whether or not every member can adequately be heard by.
No, that comes, Jimmy, that comes later. That doesn't come with this motion.
I gotta tell you, I chair another committee and we always do the roll call first so that everybody can say whether or not they hear and understand everyone else.
Yeah.
The way the motion's written is I move that we certify for the record that each member's voice may be adequately heard. Well, we can't certify that until we've had a roll call.
You will have a roll call, Jimmy.
So Bill, I don't, when you move down, there's no other place for me to make a roll call. That's why I was a little confused. Like, this is the only place where this appears, and I need to, hear a present or hear from everybody, I think, right here.
Hey, Paul, this is Lindsay Martin from the chairman's office. I think Mr. Bierman is correct that a roll call needs to happen before that motion is moved.
Yeah, plus I've seen 3 other BACs and they've done it the same way what you were doing first, Paul, what Jimmy has said.
Okay, so let's just, so I'm gonna pull this list back up. We're gonna rewind the clock just a few minutes. So I'm just gonna call out a name and then please say present here, whatever. Lisa. Okay, not present. Bill.
Present.
Prashanth.
Present.
Jimmy.
Present. Jimmy.
Richard.
Richard Chu from Reston. Present.
Brian.
Present.
Alice.
Present.
Jerry. So I know that Jerry and Lisa were going to be signing in on the same computer. I'll circle back there. Denver.
Present.
Janine.
Present.
Sam.
Present.
Tim Thompson's here.
Candace.
Here. Present.
Coretta. Sylvia. Saif.
Present from Falls Church, Virginia.
Scott. And George.
George Vestera, present. Burke.
Thank you. Okay, so now I'm going to pass over to Sam, the gavel to Sam, and to make the requisite motion, I move that the RAC certify for the record that each member's voice can be adequately heard by everyone else.
Anyone want a second?
Second.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Sam, that's all those in favor.
Sam, you're on mute.
All right, I'm off. So what's next?
You need to call for yays, nays, and abstentions.
Okay, all in favor, please say yay. Yay.
Aye.
Aye.
Yay.
Aye.
And all against? Speak. Okay, any abstentions? And if there aren't any, then it's been approved.
Perfect.
And we can move forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Jimmy, and Bill. We're all navigating this together. I appreciate the help. I certainly am not the best with any of the parliamentarian stuff. Second, having established that each member's voice can be heard by every other member, we must next establish the nature of the emergency that compels these emergency procedures, the fact that we're meeting electronically, what type of electronic communication is being used, and how we have arranged for public access to this meeting. Therefore, I move that the committee certify that the state of emergency caused by the COVID-19 pandemic makes it unsafe for the committee to physically assemble and unsafe for applicants, staff, and the public to physically attend any such meeting in person, and that as such, an in-person meeting cannot be implemented safely or practically. I further move that the committee conduct this meeting electronically through Microsoft Teams and that the public may access this meeting by joining it through the provided link. It is so moved.
Second.
I heard a second from Jimmy. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you. Just real quick, Nat, I just got a text from Lisa. She says she cannot talk or chat. I think she might be in it. Okay, never mind. She said she's in.
I think I'm in. Can you all hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Sorry to be disruptive.
No, thank you. Okay, now finally, I move that the committee certify that all of the matters addressed on today's agenda provide for the committee's continuity of operation or the discharge of its lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities. It is so moved.
Second.
Second from Bill. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. Okay, I'm going to pull up the agenda. Next is the approval of the agenda. I actually have a few changes, and I did receive something from Candy. Let's see if I can pull that up. Excuse me, that's for the minutes. The agenda, I did want to do quickly here. So it's 6:40. I want to take, it's just proposed for the moment. I did hear back from the chairman's office, and there is about the budget issue. We need to make a request, and that will be reviewed at the meeting on the 25th, which is next Tuesday. So I'd like to take a few minutes to discuss that. I think we need more than 10 minutes, but I don't want to drag. I want to discuss the budget issue and throw that out there for everyone, but I don't want to derail everything that I wanted to accomplish tonight. So I think we're going to have to quickly discuss this for 10 minutes, just open discussion about, and I'll clarify what I mean by that. And then if we need to continue on Thursday, we'll continue with a heartier discussion about what kind of request we want to make. So after our meeting last week, so that's I'm gonna make the motion that we include a 10-minute budget request discussion to the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries. Thank you. Are there any other adjustments to the agenda as is? Okay, hearing none, I make a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved. Second.
Richard seconds. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. Now approval of the minutes from meeting 13. Let me pull those up. One moment. Okay. So I did see that there was a name correction for Janie. Apologies for that. And then Candy, you had mentioned a few typos on page 2. Annandale, it's missing an N there, so I'll insert an N. Page 2, the last sentence, it should be the committee. And Janie, you had said that, apologies, your name was misspelled. I believe that was here, Lindler, there should be an N here. Are there any other edits to the minutes from last meeting?
McLean is misspelled on page 2.
Page 2. Where is that, Jimmy?
Where it says that I joined from McLean, it's MC capital Lean.
Okay.
It looks like Annandale is also misspelled 2 lines down.
Yeah, that's the one that Candy had shared.
So you can't change it right now? You're just telling us?
This is a PDF. Yeah, this is a PDF.
Okay.
Not a Word document.
All right.
I'll make these after the meeting's done and send it to Nat, which will be posted as the official minutes.
Thanks.
Okay. Any other edits? Terrific. Thank you. I make a motion to include the edits that I just described in the draft minutes and approve.
Second.
Sorry, who was that?
This is Sam. I was seconding you too early.
That's fine. This is an inclusive motion to add the edits and to approve the edited minutes. And Sam will take that as a second. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Sorry. Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, we're now a little bit over time. Thank you, everyone, for trudging through that. I know that's a necessary evil. Public comments. If there's anyone from the public, welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight. If you would like to speak, please raise your hand using if you move your mouse, there's a little face with a hand. If you hover your mouse over that and click the hand icon, Nat will unmute you, and we welcome your participation, observations, comments. Please feel free to share your name and where you're calling from and anything you'd like to share about this procedure.
I'm sorry to jump in. So we do have a few folks who are calling in. So if anyone who is calling in would like to raise their hand, on your phone, you'd want to hit *5. That will raise and lower your hand. And then if you want to unmute yourself, that would be *6. So again, for the few folks who are calling in, if you would like to provide public comment, *5 to raise your hand, *6 to unmute yourself, and then mute yourself when you're done speaking as well. All right, we've got.
And for the sake of time, please be cognizant of time. We have. Well, I'm happy to run this as long as necessary, but please try to take 2-3, maximum 4 minutes for your comments. Thank you.
All right, so we had one call-in user, phone number ending in 1544. You are unmuted, and the floor is yours.
Yes, I just wanted to make sure. This is Coretta Perkins. I didn't realize, did you get me as far as attendance is concerned?
We do now.
Okay, perfect. I'm glad I heard that because I didn't unmute myself, so I am here. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you, Coretta. No worries.
And you know that chat is off for this meeting too?
Yes.
Because of FOIA, is that still a thing?
Yeah.
Okay, just making sure.
All right, are there any other members of the public that would like to share anything?
No additional hands are raised.
Okay, then I'm going to close the public comment period and we can jump into the budget request discussion. I posed the question last week. Lindsay was kind enough to actually join us and was following everything. Lindsay works in the chair's office. and she filled in that we can make a request based on what we feel are the best needs for outreach. It shouldn't be limited to any one particular medium like electronic or paper. We can devise what we think is necessary here. So I don't really have a great starting point for this discussion other than to share that information that we need to come up with a request and that request will be evaluated. So I'm going to open up the floor to members. What do we think is a realistic, given our time frame, and practical in terms of affecting good outreach about our procedure here?
Hi, do I just speak up or do I raise my hand?
Go ahead, Janine.
Okay, sorry. Lindsay, this is for you. I know that for the Confederate Name Task Force, they actually sent out all those postcards. How much is something like that?
Thanks, Janae. That is a pretty considerable cost. We certainly don't want to dissuade the committee from any particular point that you all feel would be effective for outreach. But to that end, any funding for this is going to be absorbed from the Department of Clerk Services. So there isn't a dedicated funding amount. So because of that, there are a bit more. There's a little bit more of a constraint that we have in terms of funding, but it also has different effects in terms of, you know, with the Confederate road names, there were addressing implications, and so certainly I think if a mailer was the route to go, we would be able to accommodate it, but there is a level of constraint that we're working with. I know that's pretty vague, but
no, I just wanted to know because this is such a short amount of time. So if we did it, we'd have to like work on it this week because I know it. Now before we worked with the Department of Transportation, and they were the ones that I got the impression paid the cost.
Yeah, that's correct. With the Confederate road names, given that it involves state funds and would be a request that's ultimately passed on to VDOT, and of course the addressing concerns, it does have road implications, so transportation absorbed that cost.
Okay, thank you.
Jimmy?
My hand was up after George and Lisa, so I defer to them and then I'll speak.
Okay, I'm reading off the list in the order it appeared. So George?
Yes, just trying to get some information. Thanks, Lindsay, for that first piece. Well, another information I think we need is how much was the postcards or the mailers for the strategic plan? Once we get those 2 points, I mean, I understand the Department of Transportation did the Confederate name, but where the budget came out for the strategic plan postcards, I went through to all the residents and how many was sent out on that. I think at least bare minimum that amount would, I think, be my first starting point.
Lindsay, you're.
Oh yes, sorry. Just to clarify, happy to. We'll certainly. I can pull that. Talk to our staff. I don't know it off the top of my head, but any questions of that nature that come up as part of this discussion, I will circle back with Paul on the answers in just a day or two, hopefully.
George, anything else?
Oh, no, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Great. Lisa.
Hi, thank you. Just wanted to let Nate know that, in fact, Jerry Hyland just arrived, so he is present and in the meeting. He was having technical difficulty getting on his phone, so I have invited him to join me at home. So just to let you know, former Supervisor Jerry Hyland is with me. Secondly, Lindsay, with regards to some sort of allotment for the outreach effort, and maybe this has sort of been covered. I was running to the door to let Jerry in. Is there any kind of idea as to outlay or budget or range or any of that? Has there been any talk in the chair's office as to what y'all could accommodate?
Again, so it actually is not a cost that would be absorbed by the Board of Supervisors budget. It would go through the clerk's office. So I am actually not up to date on their funding levels that they'd be able to set aside for this.
Okay. All right. And so I guess that will go out vis-a-vis some sort of communication to us from Paul once you ascertain that information.
Yes. And we can work with OPA also to narrow down a appropriate cost. But I think before we looked at, what money was available, I think the ultimate goal here is to figure out, what you all wanted instead of, and find a way to make that work, instead of initially putting a price tag on something that.
Right. And is it possible too that budget for this type of expenditure could come from different departments, such as from the clerks and from One Fairfax and others that have a vested interest in our equity, first off, and then secondly, I just want to make sure this is the one thing I think we failed on miserably during redistricting, and I want to make sure we don't have a big fail on this effort this time around. Thank you.
In terms of different funding sources, that's something I'd have to double check on, but happy to look into it.
Thanks. I just thought that might offer us some flex if we really want to, reach folks.
Jimmy, all yours.
Sure. I just think we need to remember what we actually are doing here. I actually agree with Lisa that the Redistricting Advisory Committee did not do a good enough job on public outreach. That's entirely clear to me. At the same time, I think that a mailer on this committee is total overkill, because what we are doing here is something extremely limited. It's not the Confederate Names Commission. It's not at that level. We are simply deciding whether to recommend to the Board of Supervisors that some names change. We don't even get into what the names are actually going to be. And we are only one component of this. Like, Supervisor Lusk has already been holding town halls, multiple town halls. You can find them on Facebook, talking about what the name might be in Lee, and whether or not we change the name of the Lee district and what it would be. So I think we need to remember exactly what we're doing here. That is not to say that we don't do a whole host of social media campaigns or what have you, that we don't try to get it into the newspapers when we have public comments. But this is not the Redistricting Advisory Committee. We are of a very limited mandate, frankly, much more limited than I thought we were going to have, which is a little disappointing, but that's our mandate. So I think we need to remember that. And I also have to confess, because I don't know when else to say this, and there is no chat, but I had have a prior engagement and need to leave at 6:50 for another Fairfax Commission thing. Sorry.
And can I just follow up on Jimmy's statement?
Yeah, please.
So I think Jimmy has a really valid point. And maybe once we get down to selecting the candidates, that it might help us target our efforts and give more food for thought to this overall outreach endeavor. We missed the opportunity on the RAC, and he's right, this isn't the scope of the RAC, but does require communication.
I co-sign what Lisa just said. I agree with her.
George, before I get to you, I did see Janine first. Oh, you're on mute.
Just quickly for information, if we are interested in this, I want to give you an idea. They sent out 400,000 of those. And then, of course, you have the response that comes back. And again, it was the Department of Transportation that went through all those emails and all those postcard responses. So there is quite a bit of work involved in doing that. But it was done, but we would definitely have to have, I think, support, like you said, One Fairfax or something that would really have to help us, because obviously we wouldn't be able to take the time to add them up. But I just wanted to give you a scope, and for them to do it, it took 2 weeks. That once we had decided on the postcard, then it took them 2 weeks to make it. And then it took another, they had hoped that it would only take 2 or 3 days to get to the homes, but it didn't because of the mail. It took like 10 days. So basically it took a month. Do you know what and so if this is something we want to pursue, we got to jump on it like right away. So I just wanted you to be aware of what happened.
Thank you, Janine. George?
Yeah, I think Jimmy has a good point in terms of there's been some outreach, maybe to get more specifics, and I'm just asking for information, and we have the reps for all the supervisors here, and we have Lindsay here. What responses, how many have they had at each district level? Maybe we can start with that, and then we can determine, hey, you know what, we can narrow it down, or hey, you know what, maybe this or hasn't been yet a set N or whatever that's good for the sampling in general. So maybe if the different reps here that are here to represent the supervisor, if they can reach out back, and if they can back by next Tuesday, everyone get that response in an email today, and by next Tuesday we have that answer or something of what the exact response that they've got in each district residence. And if Lindsay, if maybe the chairman already has that, that'd be great too.
George, are you suggesting that everyone who represents a district on this committee ask their respective supervisor what the public has said about renaming?
No, not what it said. The numbers that has responded who have communicated to them back. Because or the attendance at their town halls that, like, let's say Supervisor Lusk, just some information of how many have attended, what's the total, how many emails they've gotten, because they all track all those. This is nothing new. Denver can speak to that, what a supervisor's office tracks. So all that at whoever represents a supervisor, just get that information back. And like I said, if it's already been abundant, then I agree. We narrow the scope to the point of if we even need it.
Well, George, isn't it most important that we find out what those constituents have said?
Oh yeah, I agree. I agree, Jay. This was my ask, because I don't want to ask thousands of things for volunteers to get back. I'm focused in on the budget aspect, So, but I hear you, Jerry. I second your thought.
And don't forget, we have each of the supervisors' newsletters that we can use to communicate as well.
Thank you. Moving down the list to say Denver.
Thank you, Chairman Berry. Just as a moment of reflection on the realness, the 45 days, 44 days we have left, I don't see it being possible for the Board of Supervisors to give us more than a few $1,000s to be allocated to media, which includes mail, especially if it's coming from an existing budget of a clerk's office that's overstaffed. So maybe an alternative that we want to discuss is not necessarily, these extensive outreach efforts during our time, but extensive outreach efforts once the Board of Supervisors are considering name changes, and for them to take that onto their own budgets. Since they do have more time than we do to make these changes, announce those changes, and reach with their constituents.
Thank you. Richard?
Thanks. I echo what Denver just said. Again, I want to go back to Jimmy's remarks, though, in terms of what is the scope of this effort. I mean, I'm not really sure that the response that the street renaming, the Confederate renaming project got are terribly relevant to what we're trying to do. I think given the scope, given the time, that we need to narrow this down and then figure out, if there are no issues in Hunter Mill, there's no sense in wasting a lot of time and money polling Hunter Mill. So I think we should focus on where we're going to have a need to identify candidates and why, and then figure out how do we communicate with the community with respect to those decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think you and Lisa are saying essentially the same thing. Is that after we move into the identification part, we'll know. And I think we all kind of know after last meeting where what the focus is going to be of our work, but that'll certainly guide what type of outreach strategy is prudent. I don't see any other hands right now. We have a few more minutes. So should we decide on a request for the board? Actually, pause on that, Lindsay. If possible, from all the questions that we're posing tonight, if you could just please BCC everybody rather than just sending it to me, because I'm just going to simply forward it to everyone. I don't want to delay the the question, getting responses to everybody that. And it's better just to share, globally.
Absolutely. And so, Paul, what I actually will probably do, I know Nat's on the line, I will probably send info to him since he already has that distribution list set up. And then committee members can just expect seeing the Nat's name pop up instead of looking for my name, yet another person in this process.
Great. Perfect. Okay, so we have about 13, 14 minutes left in this part. I think we should try to make some kind of request, or at least formulate a draft request that we can make a motion on Thursday if we need more discussion. But in order to get the ball rolling now in that interest.
Chairman Barry, you do have a hand raised of someone who's on the phone, ending in 44.
I think that's Coretta. Okay. Coretta, is that your hand raised from before? I see you hadn't put it down. You want to press *6 to unmute. Okay,
Sorry
I think that's
about that, guys. Yes, you can put it down. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So do we have a request that we want to pass along to the clerk's office or to Nat, rather, so that we can circulate and see what kind of support for outreach? What's the minimum? What's the minimum that we think is appropriate?
Hey, Paul.
Go ahead, George.
I'll be honest, I have no idea, but can maybe Jerry and Denver chime in on this in terms of what is a realistic budget? Because you guys understand probably inside the county budget and supervisor's budget and all this type of stuff and departmental budget than we would. What's your first thoughts?
Yeah, well, let me jump in. I guess as far as budget, I guess the first most important thing is deciding what you need to cover with a budget. What is the effort that is going to be exerted to outreach to the community? And once that is done, once you decide what you intend to do, then you match that with funds to be appropriated to do it. I don't know if anyone in the budget office or in the county staff has yet decided on the scope of outreach to communities, but I mean that to me is the most important thing as a start to decide what we're going to do once recommendations are made to change a name. But then second, as far as I'm concerned, whatever it's going to take as far as budget to match the effort is going to have to be done. We should not be shortchanging the effort to go out to communities and tell them what we're proposing to do, because the change of a name in a district has profound impact on the life of everybody who lives in that district. I mean, it's going to be disruptive for many people, and a lot of people just aren't going to like to have it changed because of the impact on their lives, and particularly small businesses is a good example. So
It's not going to change their address.
yeah. So I think I think the board is just, once they decide what the effort is to outreach, then they're just going to have to match that with funds and find the funds to do it.
Great. Saif?
Yeah, I mean, I want to know if can we reiterate what our scope is exactly, and then figure out, you know, because if supervisors are already doing their own outreach, you know, then what is our role exactly? And what are we planning on doing? Because if supervisors aren't doing the outreach, then I would say, okay, well, let's hold like a town hall in each of the districts of the county at the center. Maybe we have pizza or drinks or whatever it is, and ask people what they think. And then, you know, in like the Arab American community, we can do it at the mosque or something, or at some of the Arab churches. In the Korean community, we can do the same thing. But the question needs to be is, what is our scope exactly, and whether that is our scope. If not, then what do we need a budget for?
Yeah, great point, Saif. I'll color in some of those lines. So all the supervisors, so the newsletter from the chair's office will be not, I don't think every single day, but it will be including information on what we're doing and what the purpose is, which is to evaluate, like, collectively the committee will gather, we're going to gather candidates for possible renaming. We, as a body, will make a motion on each one of those candidates to determine if we recommend it for renaming or not. So we're not going to be taking recommendations for what they should be renamed to. Simply, our work will encompass, we think this district name or this precinct name is problematic for X, Y, and Z reasons, and we recommend that it should be renamed. The process of the renaming is not in our hands. We're not going to determine that process. That's up to the board and to probably the individual districts, and that's it. So as far as, go ahead.
So can I make a suggestion then? I mean, I think that there's two elements of public outreach that can be achieved in a short amount of time. One of those elements is having, you know, each kind of district have its own little town hall, whether it's virtual or whatnot. If a supervisor is already doing it, then the committee members that are part of that district can attend that and hear the feedback. If the supervisor isn't doing it, maybe we encourage the supervisors to do so, and that committee member attends. For the ethnic and minority communities, we can do the same thing if the county can help facilitate something like that. I'm happy to do it at the mosque for, you know, the kind of the Arab American, Pakistani, kind of the Muslim American community in Fairfax. But I think that if for outreach purposes, if we want to do that and just figure out from people what they think without getting the names and whatnot, just here, ask them, are you happy with the names? You know, I don't think that's a significant budget, guys. I just think that that's, you know, if you want to do food and drinks, if they're in-person town halls, even if that, I mean, with COVID, I doubt we're going to be doing that. So you know, the other point of this is to send out emails and do digital advertising, which I think will probably be much more targeted, but will require a budget. And we need to think about how much of a budget that requires and whether the county's already doing targeted advertising through social media. But I would venture to say if we wanted to do a really strong targeted social media effort just for this to get some sort of feedback, you'd probably put, you know, for the next 4 weeks, for example, you'd probably put anywhere between $30,000 to $50,000 in terms of a targeted social media, you know, county-wide, because you're talking about 1 million plus people. I'm not saying to do this. I'm just telling you this is what it'll cost to do something like that. So I see Denver like shaking her head no. So just those are the few thoughts that I had. Thank you.
Just one point of clarification. So as part of the when the board extended our mandate in December, part of that discussion was that Supervisor Lusk formally acknowledged that that we are going to be taking a comprehensive look. It's not going to supersede Lee District's proceedings, but Lee District is going to pause those proceedings so that we can conduct, that we can undertake our mission first. In the likelihood, I think there is an implicit understanding that the likelihood was that we were going to come to the same conclusion that the Lee District proceedings was that it needs to be renamed. And I don't want to introduce too much bias, into our proceedings by saying that, but so we have all of the, not discretion, but all of the work on our plate right now. Just one other point, I think it's important that we not focus too much simply on the residents of the districts themselves. I live in Hunter Mill District, and I find the name Lee District extraordinarily offensive. There are probably lots of people who work in other districts and then travel to districts where they might find that name or other names offensive or inappropriate for with their own justification, and I have mine. So I think that impacts outreach because those residents will, if we recommend a change and that change is accepted by the board, those residents are going to have to undertake the naming process for their own district. But that shouldn't mean that others who don't live in there, who are still part of the county, shouldn't have some kind of a say. But that does complicate the outreach strategy because, as I've said, are we doing outreach to just targeted to the districts or to the 1 million+ residents of the county? So with that, I'm going to actually go over to Jimmy real quick because I know he has to leave.
I just feel like a lot of these discussions and a lot of these plans, there's a big elephant in the room. What do we have here? We're going to consider whether or not we should recommend that they change the name of Lee District, Sully District, and Springfield. Anybody else got one? Because I don't see the likelihood of any of those other districts changing. I mean, does anyone else have it? I mean, we talked about this during the previous iteration of the RAC. We said that the Springfield district is potentially confusing. In a way, I think that's going to be the most controversial question, whether we recommend that you rename the Springfield district because it's potentially confusing because there's a whole community called Springfield that isn't in the Springfield district. Sully and Lee, one's named after a plantation, one's named after a Confederate general. So that's all we're doing here. We're trying to make a fairly simple choice in the end. And right now we're talking about a major budget for a major outreach, potentially up to 1 million people. Come on. I don't think we're gonna be doing that. I mean, I said this last meeting when I heard that we were going to meet twice a week for 2 hours for 7 weeks. We don't need 28 hours to come up with whether we're going to do that. It doesn't mean we don't go through the process to make sure that the conclusion that we come to as to whether or not we need to rename these districts or recommend that they be renamed, there should be a process in place. But let's address the elephant in the room here, which is the actual scope of what we're going to be doing and sort of plan accordingly.
Thank you, Jimmy. Going up to Denver.
Thank you. I think we're all leading down the same path in recognizing that if we don't have a budget already, there is no money. We can find something out of the clerk's budget, means we can maybe get $1,500, $200 for social media output or outreach, but that's it. I would like to, possibly propose that we do a resolution to the board asking for them to, asking for the clerk's office to create a survey that can be sent out on all newsletters, shared through targeted ad in social medias, and shared through their listservs, which includes HOAs, community organizations, what have you. So maybe if we are concerned, we're overlooking, which I hope we don't, we're overlooking the Mosby precinct that needs to be renamed, but just to have that insight, But I think that's as much as one, the time allocates, and two, we're not going to get any funding for it. So we can definitely urge in our recommendation for the Board of Supervisors to set aside a hefty allocation of funds when deciding new names. But at this point, with us saying, well, this is a problematic name, I don't think, one, we're going to get it in time, and two, that there's any money there.
I see Sam next. Thank you, Denver.
Thanks, Paul. One of the things as people were talking that kept hitting me upside the head was, what is our criteria? How are we determining or needs to be replaced? And is there a criteria, or are we just saying those are bad names? And like Jimmy said, Sully is the name of a plantation, and Lee, we know Lee is the last name of a family. Actually, the family, Sully's was a member of the Lee family that had that plantation. What is the criteria? It should be clear. It should be set. We should say something that we popped out these names because of blank, and whatever that reason is, we should be able to spell it out reasonable, and then we can use that. Look at other names. I don't know what our criteria is.
You make a good point, and the next item on the agenda is essentially to accomplish that, selecting candidates. How do we do it? I'll save my what I had in mind for that part. I think we do have like a chicken egg situation here where we need to make a recommendation about who to do outreach to, but we don't really, we want to make that effective and targeted and not, so broad that it's prohibitively expensive and unrealistic given our time frame. I did see Lindsay first. Thank you, Sam. Okay, Lindsay.
Yeah.
Sam.
So sorry, just because I didn't want to forget to put it down. I did want to say, I did want to be clear that I think maybe I painted too grim of a photo of a picture. It certainly is not a blank check. And I think that in terms of a funding amount, it would hopefully be targeted, but there is room for the committee to pursue outreach in the way that they best feel. And so if you all give us a number, we will make it work. However, in comparison, the Department of Clerk Services is substantially less, or substantially smaller than the Department of Transportation. And so their ability to absorb a cost that gets, to the 6 digits, even, I'm not quite sure what the funding was, but they can absorb a lot more than clerk services. But I think for the purposes of this group, identifying the areas that you all want to target and the level of outreach that you all would like to do to get to that recommendation. We don't want to discourage any of that. Well, we can make it work. It's just to some extent slightly constrained, but not as doom and gloom as we don't have any funding for it.
Got it. Thank you, Lindsay. No, I got it. I mean, like message heard loud and clear. We need to be realistic, but we will. We're gonna. We do want to. Push this if possible, given that our experience with the first rack round. Bill.
Yeah, I agree with Jimmy. Certainly, this is not rocket science. We all know what we're talking about. So it's not going to. I mean, it's going to be a discussion of, how do we finalize what those 3 are, and then I certainly agree with you that this is a county-wide discussion. I live in Hunter Mill. Richard lives in Hunter Mill. You live in Hunter Mill. But I'm certainly interested in discussing and providing input on what I think should happen with Lee and Sully and Springfield. And so those should not be discounted at all in a discussion around the entirety of the county, although those people within those potentially affected districts are certainly going to engage with their supervisors before a final decision and vote is being taken.
Thank you, Bill. So I think we're essentially blending our two agenda items at this point, and I think we can probably just continue moving forward with the identification of candidates. If we take a formal, so I'd like us to take a motion for each candidate that gets added so that there's a record of that, a record pointing to our action there. Assuming that goes through without much fanfare in a few minutes, I think we can kind of incorporate the budget request motion into after that. Does that sound? If I see some nods or some thumbs up from the Microsoft Teams, is everyone comfortable with that? Yes, safe.
Hey, Paul, I really liked what Sam said in terms of putting a criteria before we select candidates. Can we have a discussion about what is the criteria for the, because it may not just be the district, it may be precinct level stuff, right?
Yeah.
So if we set a criteria that we can all agree on, that maybe there are 5 points or 4 points, and maybe if something meets 3 of these points, then it would be worthy of discussion. I think that would make our job a lot easier, because then we've set a criteria. We can look at the whole county, look at all the precincts and say, okay, this meets 1, this meets 2, this meets 3, and then say, okay, if it meets 3 out of 5, then it needs to be considered. Instead of just taking votes that are don't have any basis in terms of a criteria.
Sure. No, I didn't mean to have just like a free will. We just throw anything and everything on there. Certainly, so let's move into that.
It says Lisa, and I think Jerry had a comment, and I can't raise 2 hands, but I totally agree with Sam and say, and besides which, we need to justify our choices, both for the supervisors and quite possibly for the press. So we definitely need to score these. Jerry, did you want to say something?
Have we decided to look at precincts in terms of their names?
We are.
We're going to do that?
That was part of our mandate.
Okay.
Yes, sir. So let's move into that this selection part. I put public input because I was hoping that some folks would show up tonight and express something that we could work with. But right now we're only working with written from the first rack round. So let me just skip here. Please, raise your hand and let's talk about, what the criteria are, and I will keep a running list here that we can take a motion to approve if we feel that's necessary, or we can just use it as a guide. So jump in if you have criteria to add.
This is Richard. How about just to start with the obvious? Is the name offensive to the community?
This is Brian. I would take that a little bit more specific and say just names related to the Confederate past.
Brian, I think it's also names associated with segregation.
Agreed.
I would have the word racism or discrimination in there writ large.
Paul, can I make a suggestion that we allow people to just jump in as a brainstorm type thing instead of raising hands and calling on people, just so that ideas flow, if you don't mind allowing that?
I agree with that, but Paul is the chairman.
Go for it.
So I'd like to add.
This is Alice. I have another one about whether the name is confusing or not. Hello, I think there's 2 people talking at the same time.
2 of us talking, yes.
Yeah, that's why we're doing the raising of the hand. So I'll just finish real quick. I just was going to say.
Because I can hear you.
Can you hear me? All right. yeah, that's right. Is the name confusing to residents? I'm just thinking of Springfield. Is it geographically not representative of what the name is trying to represent? That's it.
And this is Sam. I like to associate the bullet point with names associated with segregation. I would also add and slave ownership to that. The race, Jim Crow, racism, discrimination, and slave ownership is what I would add.
I would change that, what you just said, discrimination or slave ownership. For example, at Sully, there was slave ownership, but only one generation. The rest were Quakers, and they did not own slaves. So I guess it would be, I guess I would say continual slave ownership. Maybe that would be the word I would use.
I'm going to bracket that. I don't want to open up a can of worms on, is one generation, what's the necessary or sufficient condition for evaluation. But Ginny, I think your point is we need that kind of nuance. We need that kind of nuance, certainly in the report and in our discussion.
Also, I wanted to see if we wanted also to think about the economic impact it would have on the community. It may not be much, but I think it would be worthwhile to have it there.
Would that be part of the criteria, or would that be part of the argument and discussion afterwards?
Think of it this way, these criteria are going to probably get publicly shared. And so in a way, it's also presenting what we've considered. And so a lot of businesses and places, if it should change their address, although I don't anticipate it will, but it may change the names of some businesses or force them to consider it, which might change their branding. Just one example. So I would think that the community, the county would want us to consider the economic impact in all things we do.
Yeah, thank you for clearing that up.
I would add historical significance versus future looking. Is it a historically significant name, or is it a name that people no longer kind of attach to or associate with?
Saif, how's that?
That's great, Paul. I'm just thinking, I'm not thinking of district level as much as I'm thinking of precinct level almost now.
Ellis, I see your hand is still up, newly up.
Oh, sorry. No, I should lower that. I'm good. Thanks.
You didn't put the economic question in, did you?
I think we were waiting on a response to Denver's question. I certainly asked, is that something that should be incorporated in the discussion, or do you think that should be criteria? I tend to think that should be part of the discussion if there's an economic impact, but Ginny, that's for you to answer.
I would say, just to bounce off that, Chairman, I think having as a criteria saying, is there economic impact, as if we approve or we consider, confusion to the public. So should be part of discussion rather than criteria for whether we consider or go further with consideration.
I'm going to give pushback on that.
I am too. Can we vote on that maybe?
Yeah. Paul?
Let's get our a list together first, and then we can start to refine. Ginny, since it's your topic that you brought up, can you what are your comments?
What it is what are the economic impacts to changing the name? How relevant are they?
So I understand your question. We're essentially right now we're discussing whether or not we should put it on the list. Denver's made the point that this should be part of the discussion and not a criteria point. and this is for us to collectively decide. So is there anything you want to add to justify its inclusion here, or would you prefer to agree with Denver that it's a discussion topic?
I think it needs to be there as you reach out to the public, only because of my last experience for the Confederate Name Task Force, because the economic issue was a big issue. People saying that they would have to change addresses and businesses and things like that. And so I think that was something that we were weak on. We just, I think if people see that we're using this, if this is the criterion that they see, they need to realize that we're also looking out for the businessmen. And we're looking out for the people in that district.
Janae, that was also my point.
Yeah, I just don't see the economic impact from that standpoint, where anybody are changing any addresses or names related to their businesses or residents based on the district in which they live. I mean, we're talking about this at the district level and at the precinct level, and I don't think it's got anything to do with economics other than the money it's gonna take to change it from a government standpoint.
Lisa, I know you've been waiting.
I think Jerry's thinking that through right now, and I unmuted for him. But I think that my point earlier, maybe I wasn't clear on it, is if our criteria gets released to the public, if we have other eyes and ears on this, the point is just to say that as part of the criteria, even if we score at 0.5 or 0.25 versus 2 points each, whatever it is, that the community will want to know that we've considered it and that publicly it should appear on the list. That was my point.
Is it disruptive to is it disruptive to the economic interests of the district, of the precinct? Is that a fair way to write that out?
That's great. Yeah, I agree with her. It's a way for us to posture, because that came up in so much before, that at least they know we're going to look at it.
Exactly. Jerry, did you want to
Well,
comment?
I just wanted to add, if you've been operating a small business in a district that has had the same name for 25 or 30 years, an awful lot of people are going to associate the business with the location, and it could have an impact on small business. So I think it's got to be looked at as a realistic possible adverse impact on businesses that have been located in our community for some time.
Thanks, Jerry. Going down the list, going to start at the top. Apologies for skipping around. George.
Yeah, I just put it as a criteria. It's going to be asked, discussed. Let's just put it there. I mean, who are we kidding ourselves, right? And it also shows probably at the same time the values, if things are changed that as a community values, it doesn't matter what cost it is. If it goes a certain direction, we understand that, and we still make this decision as a community.
Thanks, George. Brian.
This is Brian. Then the follow-on question would become, if we're going to include that as a criteria rather than a discussion point, then it becomes a question of, okay, how do we grade the degrees of what that economic impact is going to be? What's the criteria of that? I mean, we've thrown some general things out there as far as, okay, name change and that type of thing, but what is beyond that? And so it to me, it opens up just further discussions about, weighting what those elements would be. So I do believe that it should be a discussion point. Absolutely. I don't think it should be one of the criteria.
I just want to add something. If if you brought this subject up to a Chamber of Commerce, and let me just take in my community where we have a Chamber of Commerce that affects 2 districts, magisterial districts, if you ask them, would they support changing the name of the district, I'm sure that you will have a very strong reaction to that on behalf of all of the businesses in that district. So I think, I just think as a criteria, I don't think it's unreasonable to look at that subject as something that we've got to put to bed as not an issue.
I don't think it's a priority, right? I don't think
It's just a matter of how do we shape that.
Yeah, so I think a good way, I don't want to dwell too long on this topic. Why don't we rely on our representative, Scott, to illuminate that? I'll send him an email asking him to, posing that question that Jerry just said, if we change a district, what are the impacts to the individual, to the small business owner, to the community at large, like any other angles? Like what would a Chamber of Commerce say to a district name change? What kind of encumbrances would it place on how they operate, how they plan, how they strategize, I think we're going to finalize the criteria tonight, but we don't, or I mean, at least for now, for working, but we can revisit this on Thursday if we don't feel that we've given adequate discussion. That seems fair?
I just wanted to share that the Chamber of Commerce here that Jerry was referencing that spans 2 magisterial districts is called the Mount Vernon Lee Chamber of Commerce.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, good point. I still think we need to weigh in on, we need our chamber rep to, to really kind of weigh in here before we finalize anything. So I'm going to go to Denver first, and then Ginny, I see you raising your hand.
Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, our charge is not to identify the name, it's just possible changes. So once again, we are bleeding into the charge of BOS when we're saying this could have economic, impact, and we need to survey our businesses and you need to make sure, right? We are just identifying things based on problematic and possibly destructive and hurtful histories. And then even looking at the basis of survey science, we're saying criteria where you have to make 3 out of 5. These are all positive values. And then we have a negative value that we are doing. So we're adding a second step where you have to have 3 out of 5, but you can't have 2 out of these 6, right? Survey science wise, this just doesn't make sense with flow, with criteria standards, with any best practices.
Sure. So point well taken. And that's something that we, should talk about, I guess, after we're done. Like, I just want to get a whiteboard. I think Sam said that, like, we're just putting a whiteboard right now. I think this, based on the scrutiny of this particular topic, I think we need to vote on this before we finalize this list and just make a decision. But let's keep whiteboarding, and then we can vote on the entire list as a slate, or we can go one by one, whatever makes sense. So Carla, I did see your hand up. Did you? I'm sorry, Janine, yes.
I just want to make sure people look at it, because we had the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce and then the Asian Chamber of Commerce. They were so upset that they weren't as much a part of the process when we did the other name changes. And they're just, if we can just acknowledge that that is an issue, whether we actually give it as much force, I think it will go a long way in making us a little more legitimate to caring for the needs, because a lot of these people don't know the history. And so they think, why should we have to pay for that change? So that was just kind of where my thinking was going.
Okay, thank you, Ginny.
Sure.
Yeah, Carla, I see your hand is back up. Please.
Yeah, I'm. Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to offer to the group that there is a distinction between criteria and considerations, and I would suggest that you all sort of define what criteria means, like what are the objective reasons why, for objective reasons for change, and then considerations are, potential impacts related to the change that should be considered. But I would recommend not confusing the two. I think both are absolutely important, but from an evaluation standpoint, those are two different, the terms are often used interchangeably, but those are actually two different definitions.
I think that's.
So sorry, Richard, you are next on the list, but there is a phone number, there's a call-in number that I can't see the whole number, Nat, if you can, it ends in 69.
Yeah, I believe that's Representative Thompson. He is unmuted.
Go ahead, Tim.
Let's see. Can you hear me?
Yes. There you go. You're unmuted, Tim. Go ahead.
Hello?
Yeah, Tim, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. Push buttons are a pain in the ass. You should go back to rotary dial. I don't know why there would be any kind, I respectfully listened to what Jerry was talking about, and I've heard the people talking about the Chamber of Commerce and stuff. I don't know what businesses would be upset if they lost their precinct name and or their district name. I don't know what people in the community. Now, I've lived all over the world, so I don't really have much dog in the fight, if you will, on this whole thing. But I mean, I grew up in elementary school with race riots, beating up the Asians out in Hawaii, in the territory of the Hawaiian Islands before it was a state. So when I got to Charleston and when they integrated schools, and they started talking about, I was looking around for Hawaiians and for Chinese. I couldn't find them anywhere around there. But my point being, we don't have that here, I don't believe. And I don't think that, I think we're trying to make more of a mountain out of a little molehill, and versus what our mandate is, which is basically looking, the one Fairfax and what we were talking about earlier in the top of this call, is this offensive? Is it this? Is it that? Vice what the names would be, because that's not going to be our decision anyway. And I don't think the criteria of what the businesses would be upset. I don't see any cost. The economic, we're talking about the economic. We had economic problems when we changed the name of Route 50 and Route 29, because addresses were changing and you got deeds in the courthouse, et cetera, which I brought up when I helped write the report. We don't have that here. I mean, somebody moving out of Hunter Mill becoming Jones Hill or something, it doesn't make any sense. Nobody worries about their district and or their precinct. My 2 cents worth, 5 cents worth, sorry.
Thanks, Tim. Richard, thank you for your patience.
No problem. I agree with Carla with drawing the distinction between consideration and criteria. I think the economic factors that we've been discussing are important to be considered. And I think that we should be clear and strong in our recommendation to the board that when they go into the actual naming process, that they give due consideration to these issues. Because it's at that point that those factors, those consideration factors are going to, or should be, seriously considered. I think the selection criteria that we're working with is a good start for the criteria. I have some issues, but we'll take those up when we go through them. But thank you very much. That's it.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
There's another interest group that we need to consider, and that's the realtors in Fairfax County. And they might have a very strong opinion as to what we call different parts of Fairfax County. So I hope that we reach out to the Northern Virginia Realtors Group and have their input.
Thank you. I'm making a note of that. And
they do identify where we live or where they propose that we live every day.
Okay. Are there any other criteria for selecting candidates for consideration? This is just a should we look at this or not list.
And I would, this is Lisa, I would suggest that, I just started to do some Googling while we've all been talking. And we're not the first to undertake such a discussion. And there is established criteria and considerations by other groups. So it might be something we want to look at in our off time and bring back to the group. But I definitely wanted to second Carla's voice that whatever we decide, we should probably break it up into those two topic areas.
Okay, so that's great, Lisa. If you could BCC everybody with that, I'd love to see that. I think we can. I think we're at this point we're splitting hairs on certainly the last one, criteria versus consideration. Using all of these, I think it's if everyone's comfortable, we can pause here. And if we want to amend these on Thursday or later date, we can. But I think we should take a vote on approving this as a slate or approving it one by one. So Denver, I see your hand is raised. Do you have a suggestion? We can't hear you.
I did have another piece of criteria that the name violates the values expressed in the One Fairfax policy. Would as another criteria, but we might feel as if these are just niches of that overall criteria. But if we are to consider it, I would not feel comfortable considering it as a slate and would want to go one by one.
Hey, Paul.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to second Denver's one because I think we can incorporate with the One Fairfax probably a lot of discussion points we just had, and it might even sound better to the criteria because I think that One Fairfax incorporates just the whole kit and caboodle. I think Denver had a great idea there.
Okay. I mean, that makes sense to me. It almost seems to me like we should. Like these are all sub. I mean, certainly this one, first, second, third. This is probably a standalone. I feel like these three are could be grouped. Sorry, there we go.
I think the only thing we're missing, right, is I think it was someplace in our documents early on is aspirationally, where are we going? How do we want to show up and what do we want to look like in the future in terms of how we live, work, and play? I think that came up in discussion points early on.
Yeah, I understood that to be encompassed in here, but I think you're right. It does need to be more explicit. So.
Thanks, Lisa. That's what I was trying to say in future looking, by the way.
Yeah, sorry, Safe. I didn't put that in there correctly. Life. Okay. Before we move to evaluate these, are there any other additions? Okay. So I think we're probably going to need to go through these one by one rather than as a package. So we'll do an individual motion and discussion on each. I make a motion that we include the first question, does the name violate the spirit or explicit meaning of the One Fairfax policy as a criteria for candidate selection? Is there a second?
Second, this is Alice.
Alice seconds. Discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, that motion carries. Passes rather. Make a motion to include is the name offensive to the community as a criteria for candidate selection.
Second.
Lisa seconds. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any opposed? Abstentions? Moving on. Make a motion, is the name related to the Confederate past as a candidate question, as a candidate criteria for candidate selection for renaming?
Second.
Sam seconds. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say, Denver, go ahead. Nope, okay. Hit the wrong button. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Next, I make a motion is to include is the name associated with segregation, Jim Crow, racism, discrimination, or continual slave ownership as a criteria for candidate selection.
Second.
Second.
Brian seconds. Any discussion?
I've got a question here.
Please.
Yeah, so do
So, I mean, the question I have for whoever proposed this, would Mount Vernon fall under this criteria?
Yes.
How about Mason?
Or Mason? Yeah.
No stone unturned.
I'm not saying whether that's positive or negative. I'm asking simply, is that what the criteria is meant to connote?
Same here, correct on that one.
So this was an amalgamation of multiple suggestions. It wasn't just one person who recommended this or who added this.
I'm curious about the continual slave ownership, the continual part. Because I think if that were the case, people would go to jail.
I prefer to strike continual, like slave ownership, continual or not is
I agree.
Human or not chattel. So yeah, Denver, your hands up for real this time.
Yep. I would make a motion to strike continual, or second your motion. I just think that's controversial, especially when human trafficking and slavery is still an issue in modern days, right? Just because you do it for 1 month or every other month, it's all the same issue. So yeah, would love to see that struck from this language.
I'd support that.
Agreed.
Ginny, go ahead.
I really think that this is a historical question, and we look at the history, and at Sully Plantation, which I use as an example, yes, it did have Richard Bland Lee, who did have slaves, but after that, there were not any slaves. They were all Quakers. They would actually hire people from other farms, but they wouldn't just pay the masters. More importantly, they would also pay the enslaved so that they could get themselves freed, because they preferred only using freed African Americans. So if you want to change the word, but I just
Jenny, I think that is a nuance that we need to have, but as part of discussion, eventual discussion. These should be, flexible, but not too flexible. Kind of like a constitution. We don't want to put too many adjectives in there, or it begins to restrict how we conduct the discussion. If we leave continual in there, then we're essentially saying we have to only evaluate names that have an association with continued slave ownership, whereas we can do that or not by removing it now. So I think we're actually in the discussion phase of my original motion, which I will retract. And I'm going to strike this word and then make a new motion to include, is the name associated with segregation, Jim Crow, racism, discrimination, or slave ownership as a criteria for candidate selection.
Second.
Still seconds. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
One in opposition? Any abstentions? The motion carries. This is 2 questions, so I'll reform.
Excuse me, can you change that to an abstention? Because it's not that I don't agree with all of those things.
Certainly, I think that's.
Thank you. It was just.
Sure. Denver, do you get that?
Thanks.
Thank you for the clarification. Next, I make a motion to include, is the name confusing to residents or is it geographically representative of the district?
Second, that's Alice.
Alice, any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries. Penultimate. Let's see. Let me try to reform this as a single question as an name of historical. Saif, I'm going to look to you here. Does this, Saif and Lisa, you jumped in on this one.
I don't mind you splitting those into 2, Paul, if people think that would work. I mean, my idea was when I talk about historical significance, let's say, for example, someone comes and buys the Rotunda condominium and no longer calls it Rotunda. Does Rotunda's name still, the Rotunda precinct, is that still significant? That's what I'm thinking. For people in that precinct. I just picked Rotunda. I mean, this could be some other like development in parts of the county. So that was my point for the historical significance or no longer reflective. And then the aspiration part can be another in and of itself.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying. I'm going to split these up into 2 then. So make a motion, is the name of historical significance or is the name no longer reflective of life in that part of the county as a criteria for selection?
Second.
I think that was, sorry, was that Sam?
Safe.
Safe, okay, thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Next, I make a motion to include the question, does it help residents aspire to the best possible quality of life in the future as a criteria?
Second.
Heard Lisa first. Discussion. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Abstentions? And lastly, is a change, I make a motion, is a change disruptive to the economic interest of the district or precinct as a criteria for candidate selection?
Second. I'd say that, and I second it with the comment that it belongs last, just where it is.
Okay, noted. Lisa seconds. Discussion.
Second.
Ginny, it's been seconded. We're in discussion now. Denver, go ahead.
Yeah, I think we kind of went over this too deep, but I think when it comes to criteria, this does not fall under the definition of criteria and will become a part of the discussion and puts a negative into the positive criteria measures that we are considering. So are we going to separate this? You must meet 3 of these 5, but cannot meet this 1 of 2, or considering this 1 of 2 if it doesn't flow into the survey method or criteria method.
Well, should we just, Denver, would you be opposed, and would the committee be opposed to, in fact, saying that this is a consideration and not calling it selection criteria and putting it under its own header?
I think that's a good idea.
Yes, I like that.
I like that. I like that too.
I think that's a great idea. I was going to vote against this, so I'm glad, but I do think we need to include it. So I'll retract my motion. So I make a motion to include, is a change disruptive to the economic interest of the district or precinct as a consideration for discussion?
You can't retract a motion. You got to vote it down, so it's sort of been on the floor.
No,
Okay.
can't you amend it? I think you can amend it now.
Amend it. So, I mean, do I just simply say, sorry, I need help here. Do I just simply say I amend it to, I amend criteria to consideration?
Yes.
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 Okay, so I amend criteria to consideration.
And my second holds.
It does. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Great. Okay, so we are almost at time for report design and evaluation methods. Or sorry, I think we might end up tabling this until Thursday. Now that we have criteria, my intention was for us to, for everyone, an open suggestion where everyone could use their own criteria or the group's criteria to suggest names, and then we take a motion on each name. I think, you know, based on what Jimmy said and everyone is kind of nodding their heads, we have 3 that we're probably going to vote on right now. I think we can save, if someone wants to make a motion on any one of those 3, then we will use these as part of the discussion. Or is that, I mean, am I misinterpreting how, like, I'm asking how we want to proceed here, because I want this to be consistent and thorough. So should we vote on each one and discuss based on these, or are we just going to open up and say, I recommend Lee District because it meets the name offensive criteria.
Should we assign point values to each?
We can. I mean, that's a quantitative approach. I think that we're looking at a qualitative approach here. That there are.
I'm fine either way. I only state that for purposes of discussion by the group.
Yeah. No. Absolutely.
I don't have a hard, fast feeling either way. I just wanted to offer discussion point.
No, I think that's great because I mean, and Denver kind of kicked us off on this discussion. Quantitative methodology here is not super straightforward. I think if to me, if a name meets any of these, it is that's a sufficient justification to evaluate. We're simply saying we're going to evaluate this. We're not making any recommendations at this point. So based on the criteria that we just established, does anyone want to make a motion to evaluate a name of a district or precinct?
Well, I would move that we evaluate the Lee District and discuss it.
Okay, there's a motion to evaluate Lee District. Is there a second?
Second.
Brian seconds. Any discussion?
Paul, this is safe. Jerry, I would just, if we can name, what criteria points, I think it'd just be useful with the motion itself.
Mm-hmm. Well, clearly there are persons involved in our war with the name of Lee that leaves a very negative connotation and because of that association with that armed conflict, I think the Lee District name is inappropriate.
Jerry, just for the sake of clarity, I think what Safe was asking, and I think it is important, is which one of these criteria are you basing your motion on?
Maybe we could number them so people could say
yes.
1, 2, 3, and then you could reference back to them.
Certainly the second, the name is related to the Confederate past. And one as well is the name offensive to the community for the reason that I mentioned before in terms of the name of persons who are associated with the Confederacy. 3 is the first 3 criteria that we have, I think, are all applicable to the name of Lee.
Sorry, technically, just for the sake of Denver, this was an independent criteria. So Denver 2, 3, and 4. Okay. Thank you, Jerry. We're in discussion. Ginny, please.
Just for your information, I used to live in Lee District, and I'm happy to see that we're going to change the name. But just for interest's sake, it was not named after Robert E. Lee. It was named after a descendant who was a Virginia governor. Just wanted you to be aware of that. That was not Robert E. Lee that it was named after.
And then we're dealing with connotation, right?
Yeah.
Ginny, I think that's really important, and I hope that when we're all evaluating the report that you add that nuance in. That I think that's I actually have heard that before.
Yeah, his house is there. You can go look at it where he spent the rest of his life.
Not specific to Lee District, but more generally, the historic. We will need to. I think it's important for us to acknowledge historical fact as well as perception. Until a few months ago, I thought it was Robert E. Lee, and I think most county residents would say, "Oh yeah, that's it's named after Robert E. Lee," and that is is part of the issue. But we need to explain that in the report. So thank you.
I just wanted to add to that. I was in several of the town halls that Supervisor Lusk held where the county presented on that point in fact. And I heard, in fact, if I'm recalling correctly, that there was uncertainty to that point, that there was been discussion that it may or may not be, and that was interjected as well.
I heard
I
that
agree. It was uncertain from, or at least from the discussions or presentation that Supervisor Lusk has had about that.
I was one of the founders of the Franconia Museum 30 years ago, and we did a lot of research and checked on all of that. And actually, I worked in Dana Kaufman's office, and his chief aide was McKay, Supervisor McKay. So I can be pretty. I'm sure about this one. Okay, just
I thought it was
a lot of people don't know, so I
thought it came out of a county presentation, but Supervisor Lusk should have you come present.
Yeah.
Just for everyone's clarification, we're simply saying right now the motion is to evaluate and have the discussion that we're having right now. We're just talking about should we have the discussion at in subsequent meetings. And I think the answer, I think right now, just based on this, we have to say yes.
Yes.
I'll call the question. All those in favor of including Lee District as a candidate for evaluation based on criteria 2, 3, and 4, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, next, are there any other district or precinct names that anyone wishes to bring up? Denver, go ahead.
Yeah, I would ask the body to evaluate Springfield District based on criteria number 5 and number 6.
Is there a second?
Second.
I think it's a say first. Discussion. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
One opposed. George, are you raising your hand for something?
Yeah, I just got a question after that's done.
Okay. I think there's only one abstention. Sorry, excuse me, one opposed. Are there any abstentions? The motion carries. George, go ahead.
Are we gonna get, and sorry if I didn't hear this, like a write-up or something official why each district was named what?
I think that's something you're gonna have to dig in on your own.
Okay, but has this been already done by the board and their historical thing? I'm assuming when they created something, they have some of that. Okay, because I can think of a lot of things on my own, and I can put it up to here and you guys can believe me just because maybe you like me, but is there already official documents to this already?
Well, we're simply saying we want to take a look at this right now. That's all these motions are. We will determine, if there's a dearth of information or justifying evidence when we formally undertake that evaluation, then it won't be recommended for a name change.
Okay, well then I have one next then when you get to that point.
Well, let me go to Candy. Candy, is your hand up for a question?
Yes, it is. It's not about any of the motions. It's about the precinct evaluation that has been brought up periodically. There are just short of 1,000 precincts in Fairfax County. How are we going to divide that up? Are we going to each look
So remember what I said at our last meeting. We were not going one by one through the entire list of districts and precincts. The only way that something will be evaluated is if someone from the public or someone from this committee, so if someone from the public makes an observation and shares something that is potentially troubling about a name for whatever reason, then we will make a motion to include it in our evaluation. If that motion carries, then we're going to evaluate it. If it doesn't carry, then we're not going to look at it. But we're not going one by one down the entire list.
That sounds good.
Thank you. That was a good, we needed that clarification. So we're running up on time, so I want to make sure we get through this. George, you have a motion?
That's not a fair process.
George, you're muted if you're talking.
Say it.
No, it's between you and me.
Okay. Does anyone else have a motion they'd like to present?
Paul, this is Richard.
Yes, sir.
Are you taking districts first and then precincts, or are you looking to take them at random?
I wanted to get through districts first.
Okay.
So if we need to reopen this at a later time, please tell me and I'll add it to the agenda. This is not the only opportunity for doing this. If we dig in on something and we want to, make a motion for evaluation, just keep in mind that the later in the process that we do that, the less time we'll have to actually do the research. Denver, go ahead.
I would move for us to evaluate the name of Sully based on criteria 1, 3, and 4. Or sorry, 1, 2, and 4. My apologies.
Second.
I think that was Brian. Brian. Thank you, Brian. Discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Are there any other district-related motions?
What are the three that we have now, Paul?
Lee, Springfield, and Sully.
I make a motion for Mason District based on criteria 3.
Second.
Richard seconds. Discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Wait.
Oh, yep.
You said it's number 3, the name related to the Confederate past,
That's correct.
but George Mason wasn't a Confederate.
He was the American
Mason's-
Revolution.
He was the American Revolution.
Right.
Mason's Hill, is Mason District named after Mason's Hill or George Mason? Because Mason's Hill, which is also is basically someone who was enrolled in the Confederate Navy, commissioned in the Confederate Navy.
I believe it was George Mason, but you're right. We probably need to get more information to double check that.
Which goes to George's point.
Yeah.
Okay. Any more discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Any other districts? Okay, moving into Denver, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I would move that we evaluate Mount Vernon. I know it's a hard conversation for us to have, but Mount Vernon, due to the plantation and the slave ownership associated with that land, which is number 4.
Second.
You gotta be kidding me.
Yeah, I have some rather strong feelings about that, particularly because of the historical significance of the name of Mount Vernon.
Conversation.
So we're in discussion.
And I would say that, add to that my earlier point that I brought it up at the initial meeting, which is for something like Mount Vernon, we could put more history on it and we could put down markers and we could do other things. There are other options other than changing the name. I'm not saying I'm weighing in on this other than to say that whatever we consider as part of the evaluation of changing names is that there's a way to commemorate the history as well.
And I bring this up as a motion and recognizing this will probably be the harder conversation, but I should, in my opinion, should still have a conversation by this body on if it's aligned with these values and times.
I agree with you, Denver.
And I agree with Denver, which is why I asked the question I asked when we were voting on the criteria. I think the idea is we're not voting to change, we're voting to have a conversation, right?
Correct.
Correct.
Any more discussion?
Because as part of our recommendations, just point of clarification, we could recommend keeping names and honoring history, right?
That's for it's up to us to thread that needle.
Right, in a positive way. Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion?
I would suggest contacting the History Commission. You know, you have those two history representatives from each district. They may be able to really get some quick stuff to all of you guys as you discuss this. I was trying to think what would be a quick way, and that might be a way to go.
Maybe they should be invited to our meetings.
I'm the only History Commission on, so you're right. We could have them come.
That's the point I made earlier is we don't want egg on our face either. If we don't, let's say, for example, I don't include Brad, then later on we find information. I don't understand why we're not getting a primer of that work has probably already been done and we trust from supervisors that have done this. Right. So I know it has. So I just want that official so it doesn't come from me, it comes from a body that are experts. I think we're going, if we don't choose a district and later on, hey, what about this? You guys didn't include this, but this land or this property or this person or this whatever is related to X, Y, and Z, and we didn't know, we look kind of dumb here.
I agree.
As do I.
This is Alice. Is that something staff could compile for us and send out? Or is that too much work?
I can ask.
Not be an issue.
I don't think they heard you, Jerry.
Too much work should not be an issue.
This has been done. I bet either each district or each history commissioner has this because I've seen it presented in a variety of different ways already.
Yeah, I would be really helpful if it could just be sent out to us in an email. We could read through it. I'm happy to read through whatever materials are sent.
Same.
There is a report that was sent to the RAC back in August, at least that's what they say, on unsullied.org. So if you go to unsullied.org, you'll see a lot of history there. And in that report, it does say that the testimony was submitted to the Fairfax County Redistricting Advisory Committee August 17th.
That's just about Sully, or did that encompass all districts?
It's called Unsullied.
No, I remember that, but was that just about Sully's name, right?
Yeah.
Right. I was hoping there's a place where we can get all 9 districts.
I hear you. And I think it'll take some work, some research.
As I suggested earlier, do you want me to reach out to the president of the History Commission?
That would be terrific, Jenny.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, if you're willing, please do.
Yeah, I think they have probably something already, because that always has to go through the History Commission, any history that they put on their website. So, okay.
We're still in discussion right now about the motion. for Mount Vernon. Yeah,
Can
Jenny?
we wait on that one? Just because it's just of divisiveness.
Are we saying once it's on the list, it never comes off?
Yeah. Well, no, because he says we'll have other weeks, and I don't know. I just
This is just about a conversation, not a recommendation. So, I mean, that's up to Denver for to determine, but I think since we're in discussion, I think we should approve this motion and
Yeah,
and
I
have a
would not
conversation.
rescind my motion, given the amount of conversation we've already have had on this consideration.
Okay. All those in favor? Go ahead,
What
Sam.
did you say?
Sam, I just noted I would not rescind my motion.
Okay.
Yeah.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
no.
Two abstentions, excuse me, two
Two
opposition
Two
oppositions.
opposition.
Yeah.
from Jerry and from Janine. Any abstentions? The motion carries. Are there any other district-related motions?
And this is pending clarification from the History Commission.
I think, well, now that we are going to formally consider it in a way that will be determined on Thursday, that history or fact will be incorporated into the discussion. So we're a little over time. Richard, I know you said do you have a lot, or do you just have one or two that we could pass a quick motion on?
Paul, I think I have a clarifying question. And that is, am I correct that the naming of precincts resides with the electoral board?
I believe, I'm 99% sure that's correct. Okay.
So with respect to the districts, we're making a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. With respect to precincts, we're making a recommendation to the electoral board.
But I think technically we'd be making a recommendation to the board to recommend to the electoral board, but.
Okay.
Right.
That's right.
All right. Then I move that we consider Holland Hall precinct.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Hall was a plantation owner.
Yeah, Jerry, can you just cite the criteria?
That's
It's not my motion.
Sorry. Denver, I think that was, Denver, did you second that motion?
No, I did. Janae.
Janae second. I just needed justification from Representative Chu for the minutes.
Richard, what of the criteria are you basing your recommendation or your motion on?
4.
Noted. Discussion? Richard, just for the sake of everyone's recognizance, can you again repeat why, what he said he was a plantation owner?
Yes, number 4. This is a slave ownership issue.
Okay. Any other discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Are there any other precincts? Somebody mentioned Mosby earlier. Denver, go ahead.
Yes, I would move that we consider Mosby in the Providence District due to number 1, 2, 3, and 4.
There is a second.
Ryan, second.
Ryan seconds. Thank you. Discussion.
Can you explain to me why you say that about Providence District?
The comment was about the Mosby precinct in the Providence District. So we.
Oh, so you don't want to change Providence District?
No.
Oh, okay, I was like, why do you want to change Providence District? Okay, I'm with you. Thank you.
Would not be providential.
Paul, I just sent you and Nathaniel an email. Apparently, the county has compiled a 539-page report on precincts and districts and streets that have issues by the Historical Commission, which is very informative, and it explains why each name is problematic.
And how many are problematic?
A lot.
Yeah. Well,
I
Mr.
mean,
Chairman,
Can we vote to incorporate that?
Mr. Chairman,
Or maybe we should consider to put it all.
well, the reason I'm saying that is maybe we should hold off for a couple days, and if we all take the time to read the parts of that report, and then that way we are coming back informed and can make our decisions based on criteria and real history knowledge instead of conjecture.
yeah,
So
Mr. Chairman, I would second.
Great idea.
It's a great idea.
Mr. Highland, go ahead, please.
Well, Mr. Chairman, and I know you're not going to be happy by saying this, but we started this discussion by saying, as far as the precincts, we're going to wait for persons to object to the name of a precinct rather than looking at the hundreds and hundreds of precincts that we have. And I don't think we have any choice. If we're going to have anyone complain about the names of precincts, I don't think we have any choice but to look at the names of all the precincts to see if they pose a problem under the criteria that we've established. And it's an awesome task, but to allow only those that someone complains about doesn't then solve the issue about others that people don't necessarily complain about, but do pose a problem because of their name. So I think the suggestion that's just been made as far as looking at the report that's been done is a very healthy start to it. I trust if they've looked at all precincts, that report may give us those precinct names that are problematic and may solve the issue about identifying them. But I don't think we have any choice but to look at the names of all of the precincts and to determine if they're problematic or not.
I agree. Denver, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we close out the original motion on the floor to approve Mosby and then take onto the motion of considering all others. Just so you know, Mosby has already been addressed by the school board and the school has been changed itself based on these criteria. So this is not picking and choosing, but if we can close that motion, it'd be great.
Yes. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Abstentions? All right. So, Mr. Highland, I think you're absolutely right. Safe. Thank you for this. This is really great material. Do we want to move this discussion to Thursday, or so that everyone can absorb this a little bit, and then we might just say any precinct that appears in here requires a evaluation or something? I mean, I don't think we're past time right now and it's a little late.
Right.
So I think we should table discussion until Thursday and pick this up then.
Aren't we going to just agree to incorporate this because the work has already been done? I mean, what is there for us to discuss?
I'm afraid of, so I think Jerry's point is right that we need to go through everything. And this is not everything. This is everything that they found problematic at the time.
Oh, what's the date of this report? I'm sorry, I missed that piece.
It's recent. I'm trying
It
to.
was based on a board motion in June of 2020, so the report, I think, came out in 2021. Actually, sorry, it's December 8th, 2020.
Yeah. So Lisa, I'm trying to balance what Jerry just said with, which is we need to look at everything versus just incorporate all of this. But I don't.
I guess I'm asking the question, or as a point of discussion, what would fall outside this? This was done a year ago.
And my suggestion is that we answer that question on Thursday and decide what to do, just because we can't. Yeah, we don't have enough time right now because it's late.
And we would be answering it with more knowledge after reviewing this document, Lisa.
Oh, for sure that, but I think we're going to land on the same thing. But
Mr. Chairman, I assume that you're going to send this out to everybody as quickly as possible.
I will forward Safe's email BCC'd as soon as we get off the phone.
Thank you.
So I think there was actually a motion on the floor, seconded by Jerry, to table discussion on this until Thursday. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, tabling discussion, and just for the sake of thoroughness, I make a motion that we table report design and evaluation methods discussion until a later meeting.
Second.
Yeah, I think I saw Richard seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Finally, motion to adjourn.
second.
So moved.
I think I heard Lisa seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Great. Thank you so much, everybody. We'll see you on
Great.
Thursday.
Great meeting, great discussion, everyone.